Betrayal doesn't always come with a warning. Sometimes it's as quiet as a whisper at a dinner table, or as sudden as a hand striking your face in front of everyone you love. I never thought my own son would be capable of such cruelty. But when you've spent 58 years on this earth like I have, you learn that people, even your own flesh and blood, can surprise you in the worst ways. I gave him every chance to do the right thing, but in the end, he saw me as nothing more than a convenience. An ATM, a punching bag for his frustration. And when I finally stood up for myself, well, that's when I learned what he was truly capable of. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. I've lived in Greenfield, Massachusetts for over 30 years. It's a pretty little town in the western part of the state, the kind of place where people know your business before you do. I moved here with Oliver when we were newlyweds, back when his pharmaceutical career was just taking off and I still believed in forever. Our colonial revival house sits on Maple Street, with its wraparound porch and white columns that always reminded me of a southern plantation dropped into New England by mistake. The neighbors used to call it the Clark Castle. Now they just whisper when I walk by. That Thursday morning before Thanksgiving, I was polishing the silver serving dishes my mother had left me. The ones with the delicate filigree edges that take forever to clean, but look stunning on a holiday table. My arthritic fingers protested, but I kept at it. I'd been hosting Thanksgiving dinner for 30 years, and despite everything that had happened, this year wouldn't be any different. My phone buzzed on the counter. Donald's name flashed on the screen. My son. 40 years old now, with my late father's square jaw and his father's calculating eyes. "Mom," he said when I picked up, his voice carrying that forced cheerfulness he'd perfected over the years. "Just wanted to confirm we're still on for tomorrow. Emily's bringing her sweet potato casserole." "Everything's ready," I said, running my thumb over a water spot on the silver. "Dinner at 4, same as always." "Great. Also, Dad wanted me to ask if it's okay if he comes a bit early. Says he has some papers he needs you to sign." The serving spoon in my hand stilled. Oliver and I had been divorced for 8 years. The kind of divorce where 40 years of marriage ends with a text message and an empty closet. The kind where your husband leaves you for his 30-year-old executive assistant and tries to hide half the assets you built together. "What papers?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. "Something about the old lake house property. He said it's just a formality. The developers need both signatures since you guys bought it together. The lake house. Our summer retreat in the Berkshires that Oliver had insisted we keep in both our names after the divorce. For tax purposes, he'd claimed. The one asset the divorce lawyers hadn't fought over." "Fine," I said after a moment. "Tell him 3 o'clock. "Thanks, Mom. And one more thing. Zach might be bringing someone." Zach, my grandson. 19 and already carrying himself with the same entitlement his father had perfected. "That's fine. There's plenty of food." "Great. See you tomorrow." After hanging up, I stared at my reflection in the polished silver. The face looking back at me had changed so much over the decades. Soft creases around the eyes, silver strands woven through once auburn hair, a certain hardness around the mouth that hadn't been there in my wedding photos. I'd given Oliver 3 children, Donald, Abigail, and Blake. Only Donald still lived nearby. Abigail had moved to Seattle years ago, calling only on birthdays and Christmas. Blake had died in a car accident 12 years earlier, leaving behind a void that nothing could fill. Oliver hadn't cried at the funeral. I'd never forgiven him for that. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the lake house, the one place that had remained untouched by the bitterness of our divorce. The place where I'd taught the children to swim, where we'd roasted marshmallows under summer stars, where Blake had announced his engagement. The one piece of our history that Oliver hadn't tainted. At 2:45 the next day, the doorbell rang. Oliver stood on my porch, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, wearing one of those cashmere sweaters that his new wife, Charlotte, picked out for him. At 66, he still maintained the fit physique of a man a decade younger. Money and vanity were powerful motivators. "Elise," he said with that practiced smile, "you look well." "Come in, Oliver," I replied, stepping aside. Donald mentioned papers. His cologne, different from what he'd worn during our marriage, filled the entryway as he followed me to the living room. I wondered if Charlotte had chosen that too. Yes, just a formality, really. He pulled an envelope from his leather messenger bag. The development company needs both our signatures since we're still co-owners. Development company? He looked up, surprise flickering across his face. Donald didn't tell you? We're selling the lake property. They're building a resort complex, condos, a golf course. The offer is substantial. The room seemed to tilt slightly. You're selling our lake house? Without discussing it with me first? Oliver had the decency to look momentarily uncomfortable. I thought Donald would have mentioned it. We've been talking about it for months. Months. My son and ex-husband had been planning this for months, and neither had bothered to tell me. The property has been sitting unused, Oliver continued, his tone shifting to the one he used when explaining complicated matters to me. It makes financial sense, Elise. The return on investment is… Stop. I held up my hand. Just stop talking to me like I'm a child, Oliver. He sighed, that familiar exasperated sound that always made me feel small. The papers are here. The sale is going through whether you sign today or next week. I just thought it would be easier to handle it before everyone arrives. Easier for him, of course. Always for him. How much? I asked. What? How much are they paying for the property? He named a figure that made my eyebrows rise. It was considerably more than I'd expected. Enough to set me up comfortably for the rest of my life. Even split in half. And when were you planning to tell me about my share? Oliver shifted uncomfortably. Well, that's the thing. The investment was technically made from my premarital assets. My lawyer has the documentation. Your premarital assets? I laughed, a sharp sound that seemed to surprise both of us. Oliver, we bought that property 10 years into our marriage with money we saved together. Technically, the initial down payment came from my trust fund, and every payment after that came from our joint account. The account I contributed to by running your household, raising your children, and working part-time while you built your career. His jaw tightened. Elise, don't make this difficult. The paperwork is straightforward. You sign, I sign, and this ends cleanly. Like our marriage ended cleanly? The words escaped before I could stop them. The doorbell rang again. I glanced at my watch. 3:30. Donald was early. We'll discuss this later, Oliver said, tucking the papers back into his bag. I opened the front door to find Donald and his wife Emily, their son Zach, and a young woman I didn't recognize. Behind them stood my daughter Abigail, whose presence surprised me. She hadn't mentioned flying in from Seattle. Mom! Donald embraced me stiffly. Look who made it. Abby surprised us at the airport last night. Abigail stepped forward, her expression guarded. Hi, Mom. Hope it's okay I crashed Thanksgiving. Of course it is, I said, hugging her. She felt thin in my arms. It's been too long. As everyone moved into the living room, I noticed the glances exchanged between Oliver and Donald. Something unspoken passed between them, something that made my skin prickle with unease. I retreated to the kitchen to check on the turkey, my mind swimming with questions. Why was Abigail really here? Why was Oliver trying to cheat me out of the lake house proceeds? And why did I feel like I was walking into an ambush in my own home? Need any help, Mom? Donald appeared in the doorway, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. No, everything's under control. I wiped my hands on my apron. Though you could have warned me about the lake house. His expression shifted too quickly to hide his guilt. Dad asked me not to say anything until the deal was closer to final. He didn't want to upset you unnecessarily. Upset me? It's my property too, Donald. He moved closer, lowering his voice. Mom, Dad's just trying to make things simple. The money could help everyone. Zach's college tuition is killing us, and Abby's startup needs investors. So that was it. They'd already decided how to spend my share of the money. And what about what I need? I asked quietly. He looked genuinely confused. You have this house, your pension. What else do you need at your age? At my age. As if being 58 meant I should quietly accept whatever scraps they decided to throw my way. The turkey should be ready in 30 minutes, I said instead of answering. Tell everyone to get settled at the table. As Donald left, I stood alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the feast I'd spent days preparing. In that moment, I felt a coldness settle over me, a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. They thought I would roll over, sign away my rights, be the accommodating mother and ex-wife I'd always been. They were wrong. I carried the turkey to the dining room with practiced ease, despite the weight of it. The table was a picture of holiday perfection, crystal glasses catching the light from my grandmother's candelabra, autumn-colored napkins folded just so, name cards written in my best calligraphy. Old habits die hard. "It looks beautiful, Mom," Abigail said, but her eyes were on her phone. Everyone took their seats, Oliver at the opposite end of the table from me, a position he'd claimed decades ago. Donald and Emily to his right, Abigail to his left. Zach and his girlfriend, Amber, she'd introduced herself, sat beside me. The empty chair where Blake would have sat remained, as always. "Before we eat," Oliver announced, raising his wine glass, "I'd like to propose a toast. To family, to new beginnings." His eyes met mine across the table, challenging. "To family," they echoed, glasses clinking. I smiled thinly and began carving the turkey. "Actually," Donald said as I served, "we have some news to share." Emily reached for his hand, beaming. "We're moving! Donald's been offered a position at Oliver's new pharmaceutical venture." "Congratulations," I said, passing plates around. "Where will you be moving to?" "Switzerland," Donald replied. "Zurich, specifically. The R&D headquarters are there." I set down the carving knife. "Switzerland? That's quite far." "It's an incredible opportunity," Oliver interjected. "I've been grooming Donald for this position for months. The compensation package is extraordinary." "What about Zach's college?" I asked, looking at my grandson. "Gap year," Zach replied with a shrug. "Dad's hooking me up with an internship over there." Oliver was beaming like a proud patriarch. "The position comes with a substantial signing bonus, enough to cover the lake house renovations Donald's been wanting to do." My head snapped up. "Lake house renovations?" A moment of awkward silence descended. Donald cleared his throat. "Actually, Mom, that's something we wanted to discuss. Dad's offering me his half of the proceeds from the lake house sale." The room felt suddenly airless. "His half," I repeated slowly. "Well, yes," Oliver said smoothly. "Once you sign the papers, of course. The developers are eager to close before year-end." I placed my napkin beside my plate and folded my hands. "And what exactly do you think my half should be used for, Oliver?" He exchanged glances with Donald, the kind of look that had always excluded me. "We thought a portion could help Abigail with her business venture, and perhaps a trust for Zach's education when he decides to return to school." My daughter straightened in her chair. "Mom, it's a tech startup with enormous potential. I've been trying to secure funding for months." "I see." I took a sip of water. "So you've all decided how to spend my money already?" "It's not like that," Donald said quickly. "We just thought that I wouldn't need it." I finished for him. "That at my age, as you put it earlier, I should be content to hand over my assets to my children?" "Mom, please," Abigail sighed. "It's Thanksgiving. Can we not do this now? When would be a better time, Abby? When the papers are signed? When the money's gone? When you're all living your improved lives funded by the retirement I worked 40 years for?" Oliver's jaw tightened. "Elise, you're being dramatic. Nobody is taking anything from you. This is about family planning, asset management." "No, Oliver. This is about control. The same control you've exerted since the day we married." A tense silence fell over the table. Zach's girlfriend shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Mom," Donald said in the placating tone he'd inherited from his father, "no one's trying to control you. We're trying to help you make the smart financial decision." "The smart financial decision," I repeated. "And that would be signing away my rightful half of the lake house proceeds so you can renovate a property I co-own but apparently won't have access to?" "You'd always be welcome to visit," Emily offered weakly. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "How generous." Oliver leaned forward, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet tone I knew too well. "Elise, I strongly suggest you consider the bigger picture here. Donald's opportunity in Switzerland is partly contingent on certain financial arrangements being in place. Are you threatening me, Oliver? I'm explaining reality. My company is making this investment in Donald's future. The lake house funds would ensure a smooth transition for the entire family. I looked at my son, the boy I'd nursed through fevers, taught to ride a bike, helped with science projects late into the night. And you're okay with this? With your father using your career as leverage to coerce me? Donald had the decency to look uncomfortable. It's not coercion, Mom. It's practical. The money would benefit everyone. Everyone except me. Jesus, Mom, Abigail interjected. It's not always about you. Donald has a family to think about. I'm trying to build something meaningful. Why can't you support us for once? For once? I set down my fork with deliberate care. I have supported you your entire lives. I put my career on hold. I ran this household. I was there for every game, every recital, every parent-teacher conference while your father built his empire. And you've been well provided for, Oliver cut in. Have I? You fought me on every penny of alimony. You contested the division of assets we built together. You left me with a house I can barely afford to maintain and a pension that doesn't cover rising property taxes. That's not fair, Donald protested. Dad was generous in the settlement. Is that what he told you? I looked at my son. Did he also tell you that he hid assets? That he moved money offshore before filing? That his lawyer threatened to drag out proceedings until I couldn't afford to fight anymore? Oliver's face flushed with anger. That's enough, Elise. No, I don't think it is. I stood up, my napkin falling to the floor. For 8 years, I've kept quiet. I've played the role of the gracious ex-wife. I've welcomed all of you into my home, cooked your meals, remembered your birthdays. And this is how you repay me? By conspiring behind my back? Mom, you're overreacting, Donald said, rising as well. Nobody's conspiring against you. Really? Then why did your father wait until today to present these papers? Why did none of you mention this sale before now? Why are you all sitting at my table, eating my food, while plotting to take what's rightfully mine? The room fell silent. It's not yours, Oliver said finally, his voice cold. It was never yours. The lake house, this house, the lifestyle you've enjoyed, it all came from my work, my sacrifices. I felt something break inside me, the last thread of restraint I'd been clinging to for years. Your sacrifices? My voice was dangerously quiet. Tell me, Oliver, what exactly did you sacrifice? Your family? Your integrity? Because from where I'm standing, you've taken everything and given nothing in return. Oliver's eyes narrowed. He pushed back from the table and stood. With deliberate movements, he walked to where Donald sat and leaned down, whispering something in his ear. I watched my son's face change as Oliver spoke, his expression hardening, jaw clenching, eyes growing cold. Donald rose slowly from his chair, fists clenched at his sides. And then everything happened at once. Donald stepped toward me, his face a mask of rage I'd never seen before. His hand swung through the air, fast and vicious. The crack of palm against cheek echoed in the suddenly silent room. The force knocked me sideways. I stumbled, colliding with the serving cart. China crashed to the floor as I caught myself against the wall, my cheek burning with the imprint of my son's hand. For one frozen moment, no one moved. No one spoke. I tasted blood, metallic and warm. My ear rang. The room seemed to tilt and sway. Emily gasped. Abigail's hands flew to her mouth. Zach stood halfway from his chair, shock freezing him mid-motion. But instead of crying, instead of collapsing, instead of begging, all reactions they might have expected from the woman they thought me to be, I smiled. The smile felt strange on my stinging face, but I held it as I straightened my spine and met my son's eyes. Thank you, I said softly. Donald blinked, confusion replacing rage. His hand hovered in the air between us, as if he couldn't quite believe what he had done. You just lost the one thing he always wanted, I continued, my voice steady despite the burning in my cheek. Mom, Donald stammered, suddenly looking like a little boy again, horrified by his own actions. Oliver stepped forward, his face hard. Donald was right to put you in your place. Your behavior is unacceptable. I laughed then, a genuine laugh that seemed to unnerve them all more than any scream could have. My place? I touched my cheek gently. Is this where you think my place is, Oliver? On the floor with the broken china? Is that what you taught our son? Stop being so dramatic, Oliver snapped. But there was something new in his expression now. Wariness. Donald lost his temper. Apologize, Donald. Our son stood frozen, his face ashen. Mom, I didn't mean to. God, I'm so sorry. Don't apologize, I said, straightening the tablecloth with trembling hands. Not yet. First, I want you all to hear something. I moved to the antique secretary desk in the corner of the dining room and retrieved a leather portfolio I'd placed there earlier that morning. A precaution born from decades of marriage to a man who always had a hidden agenda. What is that? Oliver demanded. Insurance, I replied, returning to my place at the table. I dabbed my split lip with a napkin before continuing. Oliver, do you remember Blake's funeral? The non sequitur seemed to throw him. What? What does that have to do with anything? You didn't cry, I said simply. Our son was lowered into the ground, and you checked your watch 3 times during the service. That's not fair. He protested, but weakly. After the reception, I found you in your study, on a conference call. You told me, life goes on, Elise. The markets don't stop for grief. I opened the portfolio and removed a stack of documents. I realized something that day. Mom, please, Abigail interrupted. This isn't the time. It's exactly the time, I countered. I realized that day that there was nothing sacred to you, Oliver. Not our marriage, not our family, not even our son's memory. Everything was transactional. I slid the top document across the table. It was a deed. The deed to the lake house, dated 3 years ago, with only my name on it. Oliver snatched it up, his face darkening as he read. This is a forgery, he sputtered. The lake house is in both our names. It was, I agreed. Until 3 years ago when I had it transferred solely to me. You signed the paperwork yourself. I never signed this. You did, along with dozens of other documents that crossed your desk that week. Your executive assistant at the time, Jonathan, I believe, was quite helpful. Oliver's face contorted with rage. That's illegal. That's fraud. Actually, it's not. Jonathan presented the document. You signed it. There were witnesses. It's all quite legitimate. You tricked me. I learned from the best, I replied coldly. The same way you tried to trick me out of my share of the retirement accounts. The same way you hid money in the Caymans before filing for divorce. The difference is, I have proof of what you did. The forensic accountant was very thorough. I withdrew another document, a thick report, and placed it beside my plate. What proof? Oliver demanded. Bank transfers, shell companies, the works. I took a sip of water, wincing as it touched my split lip. I've had this for years. I never used it because I wanted peace. I wanted our children to respect their father. I looked at Donald, who had sunk back into his chair, his face in his hands. But today, I see that my silence has cost me that respect instead. This is blackmail, Oliver hissed. This is consequence, I corrected. Something you've managed to avoid your entire life. I turned to Abigail. Did you know your father has been shorting stock in his own company? Selling shares through offshore accounts while publicly touting the company's bright future? The SEC might find that interesting. Her eyes widened. Dad? Is that true? Oliver's face had gone gray. Elise, you have no idea what you're talking about. Those transactions were perfectly legal. Were they? Then you won't mind if I send this file to the regulatory board? Or perhaps to the business press? I raised an eyebrow. I'm sure your shareholders would be fascinated. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. What do you want? Oliver finally asked, his voice barely audible. First, I want the true value of the lake house property. Not half, all of it. Since I am, as you now know, the sole owner. Oliver's jaw worked silently. Second, I want the money you kept from me during the divorce, with interest. That's ridiculous. Third, I continued as if he hadn't spoken, I want a public apology for all of it. The affairs, the lies, the financial manipulation. You're insane, he breathed. No, Oliver. For the first time in decades, I'm perfectly lucid. I stood and walked to the china cabinet, retrieving an old photograph in a silver frame. I placed it in front of Donald. "Do you remember this day?" He looked down at the image, himself at 10 years old, proudly holding up a smallmouth bass nearly as big as he was, standing on the dock at the lake house. "You caught your first fish," I said softly. "Your father was in Hong Kong closing a deal. I was the one who taught you to bait the hook, to wait patiently, to know when to reel in." Donald's eyes filled with tears. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me." "What Dad said? What did he say to you, Donald? What words could possibly justify striking your mother?" My son looked at Oliver, then back at me, shame written across his face. He said you were trying to ruin everything, that you'd always been jealous of my relationship with him, that you were," he swallowed hard, "mentally unstable, that sometimes the only way to deal with hysterical women is to shock them back to reality." A cold silence fell over the room. Even Oliver seemed to shrink under the weight of his words being spoken aloud. "And you believed that?" I asked quietly. "After 58 years of knowing me, you thought I needed to be struck to regain sanity?" Donald couldn't meet my eyes. "I don't know what happened. It was like something snapped." Something did snap. I touched my cheek again. Every last thread of obligation I felt toward this family. I gathered the documents and returned them to the portfolio. "I'll give you all 1 week to meet my terms. After that, these files go to the authorities." "You'd destroy your own family?" Abigail whispered. I looked at each of them in turn. Oliver, who had discarded me like an outdated appliance. Donald, whose hand had struck me with such casual violence. Abigail, who couldn't be bothered to call her mother more than twice a year but expected a handout. "You destroyed this family long before today," I said finally. "I'm just the one acknowledging it." I walked to the doorway, then paused. "I think Thanksgiving dinner is over. Please see yourselves out. And Oliver, don't forget to take those lake house sale papers with you. They're worthless now." No one moved as I walked upstairs to my bedroom and locked the door behind me. Only then did I allow my hands to shake, bringing them to my face to gently probe the swelling cheek, the split lip. In the mirror, I hardly recognized myself. Not because of the reddening mark across my face, but because of the woman staring back at me. Her eyes were clear, her posture straight, her expression, not broken, not beaten, but resolute. For the first time in decades, I saw myself as I truly was. Not Oliver's ex-wife, not Donald and Abigail's mother, but Elise Clark, a woman who had finally had enough. I heard the front door slam as they left. No one came to check on me. No one called up the stairs. Good. This was cleaner, easier. I opened my closet and pulled out the pre-packed suitcase I'd prepared 3 days ago, when Donald first called about Oliver coming early with papers to sign. A woman doesn't survive 40 years of marriage to a man like Oliver without developing instincts. I had one stop to make before leaving town. One final piece to set in place. An inheritance far different from the one they were expecting. The law office of Harriet Winters was located in a renovated Victorian on Main Street. I'd chosen her deliberately when I filed for divorce 8 years ago. The only female partner at the most prestigious firm in Western Massachusetts, with a reputation for being ruthlessly effective. Oliver had been furious when he received the papers bearing her letterhead. A woman divorce attorney? Really, Elise? That's a bit on the nose, isn't it? What he'd never known was that Harriet and I had been roommates at Smith College, before I'd abandoned my own law school plans to support his career. We'd reconnected at an alumni event 6 months before I filed for divorce, right around the time I'd found the receipt for a diamond bracelet I'd never received. "Elise?" Harriet rose from behind her desk as her assistant showed me in. Her eyes widened at the sight of my face. "My God, what happened?" "Family Thanksgiving," I replied dryly, setting my purse on her visitor's chair. "Do you have time?" "For you?" "Always." She came around the desk, her tailored suit immaculate even at 5 o'clock on a holiday. "Jennifer," she called to her assistant, "hold my calls and bring us some ice." When we were alone, ice pack pressed gently to my cheek, I laid out what had transpired at dinner. Harriet listened without interruption, her expression growing stonier by the minute. "Your son hit you." she said finally, her voice flat with disbelief. Yes. And you want to proceed with the plan we discussed last month? I nodded. Immediately. They'll be scrambling now, trying to verify the lake house deed. Oliver will call his attorneys tonight, I'm certain of it. Harriet leaned back in her chair. Then we should move quickly. The trust documents are prepared, as we discussed. All that's needed is your signature and the transfer of assets. She slid a thick folder across the desk. Inside were the papers establishing what would come to be known as the Clark Family Trust, though family had taken on a very different meaning in my mind. Everything is in order, Harriet continued. Once executed, the bulk of your assets, the lake house proceeds, your retirement accounts, this house, will be held in the trust with the stipulations we discussed. And it's irreversible? Once you sign, yes. Neither Oliver nor your children will be able to contest it. The assets will no longer be in your name, so they won't be subject to any claims Oliver might try to make. I reviewed the documents carefully. A lifetime with Oliver had taught me never to sign anything without reading every word. The terms were exactly as I'd specified. Strict, unambiguous, and utterly without sentimentality. What about the video testimony? I asked. Harriet tapped a few keys on her computer. Our legal videographer can be here in 30 minutes. With that split lip and bruise forming, the timing couldn't be better for documenting the duress angle. I almost smiled, but my swollen lip protested. You think they'll try to claim I wasn't of sound mind? Oliver will try everything, she confirmed. But between the video, your medical examination records will secure tomorrow, and the witnesses at dinner, particularly that girlfriend of your grandson's, he won't get far. I signed where indicated, my signature strong and clear. With each stroke of the pen, I felt a weight lifting. 40 years of accommodation, of compromise, of silent suffering falling away page by page. What about the other matter? I asked as I signed the final document. Harriet pulled another folder from her drawer. The whistleblower submission to the SEC is prepared. Once you give the word, it goes out. Not yet, I said. Let's see if Oliver meets my terms first. That's his one chance. You're more generous than I would be, Harriet observed. It's not generosity, I replied. It's strategy. If he agrees to my terms, he admits guilt. If he fights me, the consequences will be far worse. The videographer arrived, and for the next hour I gave my testimony, a clinical recounting of not just the day's events, but 40 years of psychological and financial manipulation. The camera captured every detail of my injured face, every tear I refused to shed, every moment of clarity that had brought me to this point. When it was done, I felt hollowed out, but strangely peaceful. Where will you go tonight? Harriet asked as we concluded. You shouldn't be alone, and you certainly shouldn't go back to the house. I've booked a room at the Berkshire Inn, I said. Oliver would never think to look for me there. He always considered it beneath his status. Harriet nodded approvingly. Smart. And after that? The lake house. It's closed for the season, but I had it opened up and stocked last week. No one knows I have plans to be there. You've thought of everything. I've had 8 years to think, I replied. And a lifetime before that to learn. The Berkshire Inn was a modest but clean establishment on the outskirts of town. I checked in under my maiden name, using the credit card I'd established separately after the divorce. Another lesson learned from watching Oliver's financial machinations over the years. My phone had been buzzing incessantly since I left the house. 17 missed calls from Donald, 5 from Abigail, 3 from Emily. Dozens of text messages ranging from apologetic to accusatory. None from Oliver. He would be speaking through his attorneys now. I silenced the phone and ran a bath, carefully removing my holiday outfit. The burgundy cashmere sweater now spotted with blood, the pearl earrings Oliver had given me on our 20th anniversary. I placed them in a plastic hotel laundry bag, sealing it as evidence. As I eased into the hot water, wincing as it touched the scrape on my elbow from when I'd fallen, my mind drifted to Blake, my middle child, the peacemaker, the one who had seen through his father's charm to the calculation beneath. Mom, he'd said once during one of Oliver's extended business trips, you know you deserve better, right? He'd been 26 then, home for Christmas. watching me make elaborate preparations for a husband who would ultimately call on Christmas Eve to say he'd been delayed in Singapore. I hadn't answered him. What could I say? That I'd invested too many years? That I didn't know who I was apart from being Oliver's wife? That I was afraid? Blake had died never knowing if I'd heard him. Never seeing me stand up for myself. Never witnessing his mother become the woman she might have been. The thought brought the first real tears of the day. I let them come, there in the anonymous hotel bathroom where no one could see, where no one would use my grief as evidence of weakness. My phone buzzed again from the bedside table. I rose from the bath, wrapped myself in the hotel robe, and checked the screen. A text from an unknown number. I know what he did. I want to help. Meet me? I stared at it, considering. Then another message appeared. This is Amber, Zach's girlfriend. Please, Mrs. Clark, this isn't right. Interesting. The girl had seemed uncomfortable at dinner, shrinking in her chair as the confrontation escalated. I hadn't expected to hear from her. How did you get this number? I texted back. From Zach's phone. He's with his dad and grandfather right now. They're at your house, planning something. I frowned. What are they planning? I don't know exactly. But they sent me to get food, and I heard Oliver say something about committal papers before I left. Mrs. Clark, I'm scared for you. Committal papers. Of course. Oliver's next play would be to try to have me declared mentally incompetent. The classic move of powerful men throughout history when faced with women who refused to comply. Where are you now? I asked. Coffee shop on Elm Street. The one with the blue awning. I considered my options. Meeting with Amber could be valuable. She was a potential witness. But it could also be a trap. Oliver was certainly capable of using the girl to lure me out. Send me a photo of where you are. Right now, I texted. A moment later, a selfie appeared showing Amber alone at a corner table, the coffee shop's distinctive blue walls behind her. Through the window beside her, I could see the darkened storefronts of Elm Street, confirming her location. Stay there. 20 minutes, I replied. I dressed quickly in the spare clothes from my suitcase. Jeans, a sweater, a knit cap to hide my distinctive silver hair. Before leaving, I took photos of my injuries and emailed them to Harriet with a brief note explaining where I was going and why. Another lesson Oliver had inadvertently taught me. Always leave a paper trail that someone else can follow. The coffee shop was nearly empty when I arrived. Most people were still at home with their families, enjoying the holiday I had fled. Amber waved from her corner table, her young face etched with concern as she took in my swollen cheek. Mrs. Clark, I'm so sorry, she said as I slid into the seat across from her. What happened today was awful. Thank you for reaching out, I said carefully. But I need to know. Why are you helping me? You barely know me. Amber looked down at her coffee cup. My mom. My stepdad used to treat her the way your ex-husband treats you. The way Donald treated you today. She looked up, eyes suddenly fierce. Nobody helped her. Nobody believed her. I can't just watch it happen again. For a moment, I saw my younger self in Amber's determined face. Before Oliver. Before compromise. Before I'd learned to make myself small. What exactly did you hear them saying? I asked. Oliver's been on the phone with someone he called Dr. Harper. He wants you evaluated for... She frowned, trying to recall the exact words. Acute stress disorder with paranoid features. He said your behavior has been erratic for months, that you've been making wild accusations. I nodded. Gregory Harper, a psychiatrist who's testified in several of Oliver's company lawsuits. A hired gun. They're talking about an intervention. Getting you committed for evaluation. Amber's voice dropped to a whisper. Zach was upset about it, but his dad shut him down. Said it was for your own good. Did they mention when? Tomorrow morning. They think you'll come home tonight. I took a sip of the coffee she'd ordered for me, the hot liquid stinging my split lip. Thank you for telling me this. What will you do? I studied her. Young, earnest, clearly frightened, but determined. Amber, the less you know, the better. You've taken a risk coming here. I recorded some of it, she blurted out, sliding her phone across the table. I started recording when things got weird. I stared at the device. That could be illegal in Massachusetts without consent. She smiled faintly. I'm pre-law at UMass. One-party consent applies if you're part of the conversation. I said enough uh-huhs to count. Smart girl. I played the recording. 3 minutes of Oliver's voice outlining his plan to have me helped. Donald's hesitant agreement. A doctor's clinical tones discussing sedation options. May I send this to myself? I asked. She nodded. I forwarded the audio file to my email, then to Harriet's. You should go back, I said, returning her phone. If you're gone too long, they'll get suspicious. What about you? Where will you go? Somewhere safe, I assured her. And Amber? When things start happening, and they will, stay close to Zach. He may need someone who sees clearly. She nodded solemnly, then hesitated. Mrs. Clark, that thing you said after Donald, after he hit you, about him losing the one thing his father always wanted. What did you mean? I smiled thinly. He'll find out soon enough. The lake house was still and silent when I arrived just after midnight. Snow had begun to fall, dusting the pines surrounding the property. I unlocked the door with the key I kept separate from my regular key ring, another habit born from years of strategic thinking. Inside, the air was cold but not freezing, thanks to the caretaker who had turned on the heat at my request 3 days earlier. The familiar scent of pine and old wood enveloped me as I flipped on the lights. This place had always been my refuge. While Oliver viewed it as an investment and status symbol, for me it had been the one place where I could breathe, where the children and I had created memories untainted by Oliver's domineering presence. I moved through the rooms, checking that everything was in order. In the master bedroom, fresh linens awaited. In the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed, stocked with enough provisions for several weeks. By 2 a.m., everything was prepared. I took my medications, applied arnica to my bruised cheek, and settled into the worn leather chair by the fireplace. The same chair where I'd read stories to my children decades ago. Outside, the snow continued to fall, wrapping the world in silence. I must have dozed, because the next thing I knew, watery morning light was filtering through the windows. My phone showed 7:36 a.m. and 17 new messages. The first was from Harriet. Papers filed. Trust established. Officers will visit Clark residence at 9 a.m. with restraining order. The second was from an unknown number, a text from Amber. They're going to your house at 8. Doctor and 2 men he called orderlies. Be safe. The others were increasingly frantic messages from Donald and Abigail. I deleted them without reading. At precisely 9:15 a.m., my phone rang. Harriet. It's done, she said without preamble. Oliver, Donald, and the good Dr. Harper were served with restraining orders. The police have your statement and photos. The trust is registered, and the video deposition has been duplicated and secured. How did they react? I couldn't help asking. Oliver threatened every legal action imaginable. Donald broke down completely. There was also another man there, a psychiatrist with 2 rather large assistants. They seemed quite surprised to find law enforcement waiting instead of a vulnerable woman. I closed my eyes briefly. And the other matter? The package was delivered to all trustees simultaneously at 9 o'clock. I imagine the calls are starting right about... My phone beeped with an incoming call, the chairman of Oliver's company. That would be John Hartwell, I said. Right on schedule. Do you want me to conference in? No. This one I need to handle personally. I switched calls. John. Good morning. Elise. His voice was tight with controlled panic. I've just received some concerning documentation regarding Oliver. Troubling, isn't it? I kept my tone conversational. Stock manipulation, insider trading, tax evasion on quite a creative scale. Elise, these are serious allegations. If they're true, every transaction is documented, John. Every offshore account. Every shell company. The forensic accountant's report is quite thorough. A beat of silence. Why are you bringing this to the board now? Because I tried to handle it privately. I gave Oliver the opportunity to make things right. He chose another path. He says you're unwell, that this is some kind of revenge tactic. Does an unwell person document transactions with this level of precision? Do they provide corroborating evidence from 3 separate financial institutions? I paused. Oliver attempted to have me involuntarily committed this morning, John, to discredit me before I could expose him. Another silence, longer this time. What do you want, Elise? Justice. Accountability. Oliver needs to resign, today, with a full admission of his financial improprieties. That would destroy him professionally. Yes, I agreed. It would. And if he refuses? Then this same documentation goes to the SEC, the FBI Financial Crimes Unit, and the Wall Street Journal. Today. The line went quiet again. Finally, John spoke, his voice heavy. I'll call an emergency board meeting. You'll have his resignation by noon. Thank you, John. As I ended the call, another came in immediately. Donald. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message. Mom, please. I don't know what's happening. There are police here, lawyers. Dad's losing his mind. Please call me back, I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me yesterday. Please, Mom, I need to talk to you. I deleted it without responding. Next came Abigail. Mom, this is insane. Whatever Dad did to you, this is between you two. Why are you dragging us into it? Call me back. Delete. By noon, as promised, I received an email from John containing Oliver's resignation letter, a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak acknowledging errors in judgment and personal issues requiring attention. By 2 o'clock, the news had hit the financial press. Oliver Clark, pharmaceutical executive, stepping down amid allegations of financial misconduct. By 4, my phone had 57 missed calls. I answered none of them. Instead, I sat by the fireplace, watching snow blanket the lake, and opened the final folder I'd brought with me, Blake's last letter, written a week before the car accident that took his life. Mom, I hope someday you'll see yourself the way I see you. Strong, brilliant, deserving of so much more than the life Dad has carved out for you. You taught me what real strength looks like. Not Dad's bullying or manipulation, but your quiet resilience. Remember what you told me when I was 10 and afraid to stand up to that neighborhood bully? Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away, but sometimes the strongest thing is to stand your ground. I hope someday you'll stand your ground, Mom. I hope someday you'll claim the life that should have been yours all along. Love, always. Blake. I folded the letter carefully and returned it to its envelope. 6 months after the Thanksgiving dinner that changed everything, I sat on the deck of the lake house, watching summer light dance across the water. I'd sold the house in Greenfield, donated most of its contents to charity, and made the lake house my permanent residence. Oliver's legal challenges to the trust had failed. His attempts to have me declared incompetent had backfired spectacularly, especially after Amber's recording was played in court. The financial fallout from his resignation had devastated him. The man who had once commanded boardrooms was now facing federal investigations and civil lawsuits. Donald had sent dozens of letters, each more desperate than the last. Abigail had alternated between rage and pleading. Neither had crossed the threshold of the lake house. I had changed my phone number, my email, my entire life. The only contact I maintained was with Zach, who had broken with his father and reached out independently. He and Amber visited occasionally, careful to respect my boundaries. Don't you ever miss them? Zach had asked during his last visit. Don't you ever think about forgiving them? I had looked out at the lake where I'd once taught his father to swim, where I'd watched my children grow, where I'd finally found my own strength. No, I said simply. Some things can't be forgiven. And in that moment, watching the sun set over water that now belonged solely to me, I felt neither regret nor sorrow, only the quiet satisfaction of justice finally served, an inheritance of strength I'd claimed for myself.